Hello YouTube, Genzo, Suikoden, number one fan, the Miyazaki man here, and I'm delighted to welcome back Taylor the Gaming Shelf. How are we today?
I'm doing excellent, man. Thanks for having me back.
Cool. Yep, last time we did Persona versus Suikoden, and obviously two great series. But speaking of a series that Genzo Suikoden has always been under the shadow of, unfortunately, this goes back to Genzo Suikoden 2 and Final Fantasy VII. That's a spoiler right there. Final Fantasy, right? So are we ready to go all in on the two big RPG series?
Yeah, this should be interesting, I think.
Yeah, indeed. Now, one of the things that I really like about Suikoden, right, is that the playability from one game to the other is kind of a familiarity feel, right? It's the same kind of storytelling, same kind of pace. It's the same world, obviously. But from Final Fantasy to Final Fantasy, the world is completely different. The overall theme and the feel, you could be talking about sky pirates, you could be talking about religion and trying to restore the faith in people. You could be trying to overthrow an empire. The themes are so different from game to game. So how would you classify like a Final Fantasy fan in general? Are they more fans of a particular line or the whole series?
That's a great question. And in fact, there is a big discussion going on in the community right now about that very thing, because Final Fantasy 16 and Final Fantasy VII Rebirth came out within a year of each other, and they're very different games. I mean, they're both action games, but one is set in more like a futuristic modern setting. One's more like medieval. One has party members, one doesn't have party members. One's lighthearted, one's very dark. So I don't even know, like, those could be two different fan bases almost. Like, because I loved Rebirth and I really didn't like 16, even though they're both Final Fantasy. So it's a hard question to answer. I don't really know. I genuinely think the fan base is very divided. It's kind of like where you started. Like, a lot of people are fans of like 7, 8, 9, and even 10. And then like after that, it started getting weird. And I feel like the fan base sort of got splintered after that. So I think that's Final Fantasy's problem, is there isn't one way to describe it. And it's tricky to be a fan of that series at the moment.
Indeed. And like even the same lines, right? I'm thinking Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy X-2, very different games. One quite serious. Even Yuna changes from one game to the other into kind of more fan servicey, kind of showy pop kind of feel. And then you look at the Final Fantasy VII. The main line is obviously the main story, but then you've got the spin-offs like Crisis Core and Advent Children and other things as well, which kind of have different feels as well. So even within the same kind of lines, do you feel that if someone liked the original game, that they're more prone to liking everything in that same lineup, or are they more critical of each particular offering?
I think the only ones where people seemed happy are right now the Rebirth or the Remake trilogy. They're very similar. So if you started with Remake and you go into Rebirth, the structure is a little bit different. Like Remake is more linear, whereas Rebirth's kind of an open world game. But the characters are the same, the combat's the same, the like vibe of the games are very similar. So I think those fans are happy. And I would even say 13 fans are happy because they made 3 13 games, which trying to like say this, like what a dumb naming convention, like 10-2, 13-2. It's so confusing. But I think those fans genuinely liked it. Like I think people like 13 really like 13-2, and even probably like Lightning Returns to a certain extent. But yeah, like you said, I think 10-2 are like quite different. Even me, I liked 10 a lot, and I played 10-2, and I'm like, this is not. Yeah, it's very strange, a very strange game. So there's not a lot of direct sequels that people seem to enjoy.
Yeah, no, it's a very interesting decision from Square Enix and the direction that they go as well. And in terms of kind of the games that stand the test of time, Genzo Suikoden 2 is obviously known as a classic in a lot of people's top 10s, replayability value. A lot of the characters, you know, you can try new parties. It's got mini games, the story, the music, everything about it is just epic. From my point of view as a Suikoden fan, Final Fantasy VII and probably Final Fantasy VI probably stand the test of time better than a lot of the other Final Fantasies. Why would you think that is?
Honestly, I think those were just sort of the peaks. I think that's when most people got into RPGs. I know that's when I did. And I just think there's something about the story and characters. Like, there's some good story and characters in the other games, but man, that cast of characters in 7, they're just so distinct, and you have these moments with them that are like really heartbreaking. You get to know them in deep ways. They all have their little moments throughout the game. And then same with 6. Like 6, it's like you're constantly cutting away to different party members. You're like constantly splitting up and things like that. And it was just I just think they're like really well written, well developed characters, and not to say that the other ones aren't, but I think that it's kind of that combination, like really well written characters, and I think that's just sort of like the inflection point where a lot of people were getting into JRPGs for the first time.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And especially because in Suikoden, the main characters, one is quite memorable because of his initial placement in the story, which faction he belongs to, and what eventually happens. 2 is very, very memorable. 3 is memorable for different reasons, for the fact that there isn't one single protagonist. There's that triad system, the 3 main protagonists, and even the main star isn't one of the 3, so it's very unique. 4, the main character is almost that non-speaking, non-personality, wearing short shorts with a very dodgy animated run because of the low budget. So very, very away from there. And because of 4, people almost gave up on number 5, even though I would say that number 5 is a return to quality for the series, and the main character is somewhat memorable because of his role in the story as well. You look at Final Fantasy's main characters, right? So Cloud, obviously very memorable, Avalanche member, and all the dealings with Sephiroth. Squall is memorable, but he's kind of related with negative connotations, right? A little bit emo, a little bit standoffish, a little bit confrontational. Tidus is memorable for some memes, but then again, he is quite a fleshed out character. But then you look at Balthier, Van, right? Which one should have been the main character in that kind of series? Zidane, what a name, Zidane. And then why do some main characters really feel like the main characters, and some are just like add-ons? Like Lightning is obviously a main character, but Van is definitely not.
Well, it's funny that you bring up 12, because I think in 12, literally Balthier was supposed to be the main character in development, but then they're like, no, we need like a young kid that people can relate to. So they kind of just threw in Vaughn and Pinello. And so it feels very tacked on, because like if you play through most of the game, he's kind of just along for the ride. Like stuff is happening and he's just along for the ride. He's not like making any of it happen. Whereas like you talk about Cloud, like the game starts as Cloud. You know, you're doing that bombing mission. He's a mercenary. Like he's making all these very intentional decisions. And then, you know, with his like mind freak stuff that's going on, you're like, what's happening with him? So it seems very centered around his story. Whereas Vaughn has almost nothing to do. He's just like, I want to be a sky pirate. And it's like, well, Balthier is the sky pirate. So he's the one that's interesting. And I think just Balthier is a way better character.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bosch was quite interesting. His backstory as well.
Yeah.
Getting that. Pretty badass. Like I could do a direct ranking in terms of Genzo Suikoden main character popularity. It's probably 2, Rue, then Ter McDowell, number 1, and number 3 is probably the free cast, Hugo, Gedo, Chris, and then Fredo, number 5, and then 4, Laszlo. If you were to put the main characters in Final Fantasy, the top 5 in order, what would you say would be the top 5 in popularity of main characters?
In terms of I mean, it's got to be Cloud number 1. I don't think there's any way to get around that. And then from there, I mean, it really splits after that. I think people really have different takes. I think people have really like, I think initially when 9 came out, people didn't really like 9 because it was very like kiddie, where we were sort of used to the futuristic, like proportioned character models. So I would say Zidane, or Zidane, however you want to say it. It would be number 2. For as much as people don't like 16, I think people actually really like Clive from 16. Okay. So I think maybe Clive would be number 3.
Ahead of Noctis? Ahead of Lightning?
Well, see, I think, again, it's hard to rank because, again, people are very contentious. I'd say Noctis, I almost put Noctis in the same category as Squall, because he's kind of just like, I got to go get married. I got to get on the road trip. Like, I just feel like he's kind of a whiny little brat for most of the game. 4, I think I would put Terra. Even though 6 is very, there could be multiple main characters, but people really like Terra, so I think probably Terra. I would maybe flip-flop her with Clive, just because she's so, like, she's been there a long time. And then 5, man, that's, I feel like you could just roll the dice and it could be anybody, but maybe I'd throw, maybe Lightning, maybe Tidus. I'm trying to think of some of the older games too, but probably just for fun. I like Lightning, so I would maybe Lightning, I guess. Lightning's very popular in Japan. I know that.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Her merch is good as well. She's kind of that badass female heroine, with Sarah as well, obviously, little sister
Yeah, yeah.
going for it. And in the games, right? So obviously, when you play a Suikoden series, you know the world is governed by the 27 true ruins. You're going to talk about ruins. You're going to talk about different factions within the world. Very, very kind of human against human. In the Final Fantasy world, there's so many different systems to become aware of. There's materia, there's junction materials, there's magicite, there's all these kind of different themes within the games as well. Do you think Final Fantasy would benefit from having more consistency throughout the series? So certain things like Moogles and Chocobos throughout the series, but apart from that, the connections between the worlds vary quite a lot. So do you think they would have more of a nested fan base if they connected them a bit more?
100%. Yeah, kind of like I alluded to at the beginning. I think that's the big problem right now. Is so when Naoki Yoshida, he's the director of Final Fantasy 14 and he was producer on 16. They asked him like, so what is a Final Fantasy? And his answer was so vague. It was just like, oh, a game that has top quality graphics and is fun to play or something. I'm like, that is a ridiculous answer. Because even like if you were to ask a fan, they're like, I don't know, a game that's an RPG that has Chocobos and Moogles.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. I think it needs more consistency. And I think that's why the remake trilogy has been successful, because it's the same characters, the same combat system. They iterate little bits here and there, but it's mostly the same. You know what to expect. But I think that's the problem with Final Fantasy right now is when 17 comes out, we're just like, I have no idea what that game is going to be. It could be HD 2D. They could go back to turn-based. They could keep going with the action thing. Like, we just have no idea. So it's really hard to be a fan or to get into the series, because it's like, if you like 16, there's not really a game like 16 in the series. And so but I think that's why the series saw so much success on the PlayStation 1 going into PlayStation 2, because they were all fairly similar, like turn-based, the structures were pretty similar. The world and the characters were different, but generally you kind of knew what you're getting into. But now it's just like, it all goes out the window every single game, which I think has got to be it's got to make it hard for them to develop new games too. So I think they could definitely do with some more consistency.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And I think one of the things that I would really, really enjoy from that series is there's certain elements from each game that adds its own uniqueness. People remember Triple Triad, the card game from number 8. People remember Blitzball from number 10. People remember all of the different characters, colorful cast characters from number 6 that you can get. There's so many mini games like in Final Fantasy VII as well. But there's not a single game that gives you all those offerings from game to game consistently, right? So you've played the HD remake of Suikoden recently, so Chincharomin, the dice game, and the cups, and the gambling, and that kind of stuff as well. Which of those particular mini games do you think would really add values as a consistent kind of line? Because people have fun collecting the beasts for in Final Fantasy X, to make the weapons. People collect the cards for Triple Triad games. There's even online unofficial Triple Triad kind of things as well. Which of those do you think should appear in future Final Fantasies, because they were popular, right? They have their own fan bases.
Yeah, so in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, they added a new card game called Queen's Blood.
Yeah.
And it's sort of a little bit of an iteration on those, like Triple Triad, whatever you want to call it. And people really liked it because there was like this whole quest line where you level up your rank. You're trying to find the maker of the game and stuff like that. So people got really invested. So it could probably use some refining, like tweak it a little bit in the next one, but I think at least the card game, I think would work really well, just because that's probably the most iconic mini game. Like, obviously, like you said, each one has their own little interesting one, whether it be Blitzball or like in 7, you could do the motorcycle combat thing. But yeah, I think some kind of card game, whether that's Queen's Blood or iterating on Triple Triad, but doing a card game, I think would be great.
Yep. I think so as well. I love those mini games. Something I haven't seen in Final Fantasy is the ability to change the course of the story based on decisions you make. So it's very linear, right? You go from one point to the end point. Do you ever think they'll release a Final Fantasy where your decisions, right, will bring you down deeper and darker paths? Characters will either survive it in the game or not survive it in the game, or do you think they want you to be attached to that core cast of characters and see that the stories, through a linear path, or will it ever diverge into, depending on which option you take, you know. I was hoping that based in, I think it's Final Fantasy X Part 2, the decision you go, which team you go with, the new Youth League or the new Yevon or whatever it's called, would have brought you to a completely new storyline and new endpoint. But every Final Fantasy has kind of gone into that linear tunnel vision into the end of the story. Do you think they'll ever have a multi-path story where you can replay it again to unlock the different endings?
I don't think so. This is another thing that Naoki Yoshida kind of scoffed at, but he doesn't like the term JRPG. But I think most JRPGs are linear. Like Western RPGs are the ones where it's like you can make choices and the story changes. I just don't think JRPGs do that, and I just don't think Japanese developers make games like that. I'm trying to think of any big JRPG where you can change. Maybe Kingdom Hearts, I guess.
Chrono Trigger. What about Chrono Trigger?
Chrono Trigger. That's a good one. Yeah, I mean, gosh, the biggest one. Chrono Trigger is kind of an anomaly because most of them don't have. I mean, they have like the good ending, and I guess I was saying with Kingdom Hearts, but for the most part, they kind of like. I don't, to answer your question, I don't want them to do that, and I don't think they will do that. I want them, I think when Square's on the top of their game, they're master storytellers, and I personally don't really like that kind of stuff. I mean, it's kind of fun, but like outside of maybe Mass Effect, I really haven't seen a game where, wow, that was so worth, I need to go do it again, and see how the different ending turns out. And I'm going to get flamed in the comments. I understand there's other games that do that, and maybe they're better, but to me, it just doesn't matter. So I would rather them just tell me the best crafted story you can tell me. I don't want to change it myself.
Indeed, yeah. And this might be one quite close to your heart, particularly. So even Suikoden had its own Suikoden Tactics series, right, which expanded on the story of number 4 and how we got to that point in time as well. Very interesting entry line to put it against number 4, which was widely considered maybe the least popular of the line, to have a tactics game dedicated for it to explain the story. Obviously, Final Fantasy Tactics is very, very popular, huge fan base, huge customization. The story, I feel, was actually really well done as well. The War of the Lions, Delita, and Ramza as well. Do you think it'd be worthwhile them exploring tactics options for some of the other mainline Final Fantasy games, or even creating a new tactics line itself?
Oh God, that would be my dream. Final Fantasy Tactics is like a top 3 all-time favorite game to me. And there's a Nintendo Direct later today, as of the day we're recording. We might even hear about that fabled Tactics remaster at it. But there was a Tactics spin-off from 12 called Revenant Wings, which I think starred Vaughn and maybe some other characters. And weirdly enough, Balthier is in, I think he's in War of the Lions, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's Balthier. I know Luso is, who's in Advance, and I want to say Balthier is in it as well. Maybe I dreamt that, but for some reason I'm thinking Balthier is in it. But no, I would love that. Like, I'm trying to think of some of the games where it would, I mean, genuinely pick any of them. I would totally be down, especially in that HD 2D style, like they did with Triangle Strategy. Like, oof, that would be gorgeous. So 100%. I don't know if they're wanting to do that, like do all these spin-offs, or if they just want to focus, but I would 100% be down. I would love for them to do a proper Tactics 2, because Advance doesn't really have anything to do with the first game. And the first game's story and characters, that lore, that world is so rich. Like, there's so much more they could do with that. So I would love a proper sequel. That'd be amazing.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And it's more dark as well, because in the Tactics series, they were not afraid to cut off main characters on other characters and go down, the realism behind it. You get attachment. Oh my goodness, the twists and the turns and the scalability of that world, and, just building upon event after event and building to the climax with that payoff as well. I think Tactics probably did it better than a lot of other main Final Fantasy lines, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's a battle in Tactics where literally a party member turns on you mid-battle, and the funny thing about that is if you know it's coming, you can take all their gear off, and it's really easy to kill them. But yeah, no, that series, though the twists and turns with the story and like the customization and honestly, the map design. I think that's where
Yeah, that was
Tactics
good as well, yeah.
excelled, where even Fire Emblem fails. Like most Tactics maps are just flat, whereas Final Fantasy Tactics has so many unique objectives and ways that you have to deal with the fights. So I think it's the king, like the undisputed king. So yeah, if that team could get another crack at it, that would be
For me,
right up my alley.
It's number 2 for me. My favorite Tactics RPG of all time was Vandal Hearts. Did you ever play Vandal Hearts?
I've seen clips. Is that the one where you kill guys and they spray like fountains of blood?
That's the one.
I've never played it, but I've seen it. I've always wanted to try it.
The story and the music is hugely underrated in that one, and it's so funny that the commercial that came out in Japan for that one actually had Vandal Hearts and Genzo Suikoden back to back, which is why I got into the series, to be honest. I thought it was associated. It's obviously not. But they even did crossovers. Like for the Vandal Hearts commercial, it had a Genzo Suikoden song. For the Suikoden commercial, it had a Vandal Hearts song in it. I don't know what they were planning back in the day. They have nothing to do with each other, but I think some of the same developers did work on it. But yeah, highly recommend getting to that one if you like your Tactics as well. So in the future for Final Fantasy as the brand as well, we have no news on next entry. We have no idea what the world's going to be, what team is going to work on it as well. Do you think it's worthwhile them creating the super team to make the ultimate experience? Because they love to spin off and do different projects, assign different staff to different projects, and we get all these side games as well. Do you want them to consolidate efforts to make each individual line the absolute best it can be? Or are you of the opinion that the more games, the better, because one of them is bound to be a hidden gem?
Here's what I think they should do. So what they did with the Final Fantasy Remake trilogy, or what they're still doing because they have one more game. So they made Remake, they kept the team together, and they knocked out Rebirth in like 4 years, which is like a miracle. And considering how big that game is and just like how the state of game development is today. So what I think they need to do is like, we have this team, all they do is mainline Final Fantasy games. And the point is to like keep it together, and so they can iterate and make them faster, and so the fans can expect the same thing game to game. Like, I don't want Naoki Yoshida's team to make one thing and then like Tetsuya Nomura's team to make something different, because those are two totally different visions, right? So I would rather just, it could be a mega team, whatever you want to call it, but just keep the team consistent. That's the most important thing. And I genuinely think what the team that they're using to make the remake trilogy, keep them together. I think that's what the fans have been enjoying the most. Like, iterate on that combat system, make a new world if you want. That's totally fine. But I think consistency has got to be the key going forward, because for a while they're like, oh, that's what's great about Final Fantasy. It's always different. But now it's like, I think you're getting so different that like, you're not even building a fan base anymore. You're just, I don't even know what they're doing. So
indeed,
that would be my advice.
And that's an interesting question as well, because in the Suikoden world, I think there's a finite number of places that you can go to, right? So there's actual islands, there's named places, locations. The map is quite established already. So there's only so many entries that we can have until that series is probably wrapped up, for better or for worse. Hopefully we do get a lot of additional games now that it's back in the limelight. With Final Fantasy, it's never ending, because as you mentioned, there's no continuity. You can just brand it under the Final Fantasy name. Would you ever support a game that has the same kind of themes and tropes, so like Eiyuden is to Suikoden, but not under the Final Fantasy banner? Or do you think they'll always be retained under the Final Fantasy banner because it's a marketing kind of tool?
That's an interesting question. I feel like, no, I mean, just for the purposes of commercial sales, I feel like they have to. Because I almost wonder, like, I thought about something like Forspoken, and I'm like, I wonder if that started life as a Final Fantasy game at some point, and they're like, nah, let's spin it off and do its own thing because it's so different. It's like too different. Yeah. But I almost wonder if, because let me answer your question first. I think they should keep it under the umbrella. Yeah. Right. Just have everything be Final Fantasy. But I would not be opposed to the idea of making a Final Fantasy game like a pixel HD 2D type of game. Okay. Like having 17 be like a pixel art game, and then like 18 or whatever is like the AAA big budget one. I think that would be cool. But I think that's maybe what they were trying to do with games like Bravely Default and Octopath Traveler and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, they can keep playing with those series, but Final Fantasy has just got to be Final Fantasy, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And I say that as well because the name brand itself doesn't always lead to success if the game itself isn't so good. So, for example, Xenosaga to Xenogears has always held that high esteem, even if it trailed off because of budget and issues at the end of the project. And then things like Chrono Trigger to Chrono Cross, and even Nier, and then Nier Automata as well. So, good enough games and good enough teams, the game itself can stand the test of time, and you can probably spin off a series on the back of that. If the core Final Fantasy team made a new series and it was branded as creators of Final Fantasy are making this new world, like expanding Nier Automata or whatever, do you think there's a world where Final Fantasy becomes a standoff headline, but then we have one new brand like a Suikoden that has continuity, that's starting from the very start, and then they're building this new super series because Persona is established, Final Fantasy is established, Genzo Suikoden is coming back as well. Is there room for that new series?
I think so. I that's actually a really good idea because like I wonder if something like Fantasian could be that. Now I understand Square didn't make that, although Sakaguchi did, and he created Final Fantasy. Yeah. So I would love that, quite honestly. Like because like Square has, the problem is Square has all these legacy JRPG franchises, right? They got Star Ocean, they have Valkyrie, they have Kingdom Hearts, Dragon Quest, they have everything. And so I'm sure in their mind it's like, well, if we were to make something new, let's just put it under one of these other franchises and call it a day. But I would love that. I think that's a great idea. Like, yeah, like we're making something new, but there's some continuity with it, because all those other franchises I named have continuity to them. And people are like, okay, I kind of know what to expect from a Star Ocean game. I know what to expect from Dragon Quest, but Final Fantasy is not that. So, yeah, if they had another pillar, whatever you want to call it, I think that would be a great idea.
Excellent. And obviously, this is a Suikoden channel. So after you finish the HD remasters, I know you're on number 2 right now. Would you be tempted to play number 3, number 4, and number 5, or would you be waiting for the remasters of those before you get your hands on those?
Oof. Quite honestly, I think the backlog and just looking ahead, there's just too many other games. I would probably wait for the remasters. Yeah. Although I've dabbled in, I want to say 3. I can't remember. I remember the game vaguely. You start off in this little tiny village, and your character has blonde hair. I don't know if that sounds familiar.
If you chose Hugo, yes, it's a triage system. So you could have chosen one of the 3, one being Hugo. Sounds as though the one you mentioned. Tribal kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one. So, yeah, unfortunately for us, that's the thing. I reckon Final Fantasy VII really got off to a head start because of the marketing push behind it and the successful power of the Final Fantasies that precede it, right? With, Cecil and all the others before with 2, 3, and 4 and 5. Whereas Genzo Suikoden didn't have that marketing push, especially in the West. So number 3 that you just mentioned wasn't even available in the UK. I had to go to Hackney Market to get a dodgy ROM or something. And then on the PlayStation, you've got like a little pin or something which you pull to the side, which allows you to play it region free. I got all these little things back in the day, all dodgy kind of stuff. But if they had back in the day created the exposure to that series in the same way that Final Fantasy does, I would have hoped that we would have got more mainline games and the budget and interest would have been there. But now that the HD remasters are released, do you feel amongst the kind of JRPG trope, the kind of genre, the communities online on Discord, do you feel the discussions are starting again, the interest is there, panels are being created for it, merchandise I know is being created for it? Do you feel that it's really back for good?
I'd like to think so. I mean, from just being a content creator and the things I've done and talked to with people behind the scenes, it seems like Konami really put their shoulder into this remaster. Because like I remember when it got delayed, people were like, it's a remaster, why are you delaying it? But then when you play it, it's almost like a remake, because they added all these extra little accoutrements, they redid all the backgrounds, they have new character portrait. I mean, they did a lot for this remaster, and it's really good. And like in Japan, at least, they're like doing an anime, a manga, stage play. They're doing the mobile game, Starleap. And yeah, like you had kind of mentioned, I was on a panel yesterday with 4 other creators talking about Suikoden and so it seems like Konami is really trying hard to push it, which is surprising. But when I saw Starleap, I'm like, this game looks really good from like a production value standpoint.
Yeah.
And if they did a 6, my guess is it would look like that. So my hope, when Starleap comes out, I want to try to support it and promote it, because that's all we can do, right? It's like we can buy the remaster, we can support the mobile game, and then that way when it's time, I'm sure they're already working on 6, honestly. Like, they must be. Like, they're in pre-production or something. So I would be surprised if it didn't happen, but I'm curious to see what the sales are for this remaster. They haven't said anything, but it seems like people really liked it. It seems like there's a lot of discussion going on. So my hope is that they keep it rolling.
Agreed. And that's exactly what we want to hear. We want Genzo Suikoden 6 made in our lifetime sooner than later. And I think they're doing everything right here. The sales in Japan have been amazing. It's astonished Konami themselves. Their merchandise has flew off the roof. I've literally just bought the blankets, oversized big blankets for the whole 108 Stars of Destiny. You could get them in those gacha claw machines, as everywhere in Korea, in Japan, but they're not available in Miyazaki. But I've just bought some of them as a Mercari Japan as well. We know David Bink loves his Suikoden, so the more big creators that can put the name out there, the better. And as you mentioned, Starleap as well. It's a mobile game that's free to play, which will bring people's interest in it because it actually looks really, really good. And I think the monetization of it is only if you have that nostalgia. You want those characters from the past. There must be some mechanism for you to recruit, characters from other series. But the mainline game is completable without paying a single penny. So because it's free to play freemium, I hope that it brings newer fans into the series as well. And just for everyone's interest, where are you at the moment in HD remaster in Suikoden 2? How far have you got to?
Oh gosh, I'm trying to remember the last thing I just did. It's been a few days since I played it. I couldn't tell you. I know there's a part where like there's a stone blocking a part. There's like a big gate and there's like a stone that you can finally move out of the way and keep exploring the world. I think I just did that.
Okay, yeah.
And I'm walking around. I know exactly where I am. I'm trying to find a boat to cross a river, and there's a guy. I played dice with this guy, and I lost to the dice game. He's like, well, better luck next time. So I'm trying to trying to get the boat from him. That's what I'm doing.
He can fund your whole recruitment, whole playthrough when you eventually get him. Yep, with the dice game. Good stuff. Thank you so much, Taylor, for joining me on this Final Fantasy V Genzo Suikoden discussion. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to the Gaming Shelf top quality channel. He's got the best editing in all gaming channels, to be honest. Until next time, Miyazaki Man and the Gaming Shelf, Ichiban, it means the best. Janet, ciao.